Hello and welcome to this tutorial for CG Tuts. My name is Jonathan Williamson, and this time around we're going to be looking at how to use the Re-Topology tools within Blender to create a low poly model of a higher resolution character model. Now this could be used primarily during game development when working from a high resolution model and you need to create the low poly version. It's great for generating normal maps, baking out displacement maps, or anything like that where you're dealing with lower versus high resolution models. Now this is actually really easy to do within Blender, and the main requirement is just that we first start off with a high poly model. In this case, I've just pulled in this alien head model that I did a long time ago, and while it's not incredibly high resolution, it's strictly modeled, there's no sculpting detail or anything like that, it's much higher than you would see on any normal low polygon models. And so this will actually work quite well. Now, this is quite easy to do. And what you want to do is first off, just go ahead and hit your spacebar, add mesh, and frankly you can use any mesh object here because we're actually just going to be deleting everything. So let's just add a cube. And then immediately hit tab to go into edit mode, and by default everything will be selected, so at which point you can just hit X, delete vertices. Now the key point here, what we need to do next is go down here and turn on retopo. By default it's actually off, I just forgot to turn it off before starting this video, and so just go ahead and click retopo under the edit buttons, which you can get to via here or F9, click it, and then just leave that as is. Now there's two different ways that we can do this. One, which is probably the simplest way to get started, is to just go in and pick out an area to start with, let's say going around the eyes, and hold down Control and just left click to start extruding new vertices. Now, one thing with Retopo is you do need to be sure that you are in shaded mode, so you can toggle this by hitting Z, or down here, simply go to Solid. And you can just Control left click, left click, left click, left click, and now you can kind of see them here. And now if you toggle back to wireframe mode, you can see the vertices that we're creating, and you'll notice what's really cool about Retopo is that it's creating it at the same level of our mesh, and so we don't have to worry about placing our vertices. We can just simply tell it where we want it on our model to place it, and Blender does the rest. So if we continue on around the eye, zoom in here, and then at this point maybe select these two vertices and hit F to fill that edge. Very, very cool. You can even select a vertice, move it, and it will follow the mesh as you go, as you can see there. And so if you need to reposition vertices, it's not a problem. There's no need to delete it and then re-extrude. So then you can select, now it works best to do it a single vertex at a time, but you can select, say, 2 at a time, and Control click, and extrude an edge at a time. Now just be careful because sometimes this does get a little finicky. If it works, more power to you, but just be warned that it may not work perfectly. And so at this point, you just keep extruding, and we can fill in these faces by selecting all 4, hitting F, move this down. And so, the key to creating a good mesh with this tool is knowing your topology well, which I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial, so I don't want to make this a topology tutorial, as there's a lot of those around. If you're not familiar with topology, feel free to check out some of my further tutorials at montagestudio.org is my personal website, or my personal and studio website. And I'm sure there's some other ones on CG Tuts as well, if you're needing topology. So at this point, you can just keep extruding. And we're going to go ahead and just extrude all the way around the eyes here. And then I want to show you another really cool tool, or part of Retopo, that's very, very cool. And that's actually the paint option. So you can see I'm going in and adjusting these anytime that I need to, and then just filling in my faces. And you notice, of course, as sticking with good topology, I've got strictly quads going on. Okay, so that's cool. Very, very cool. In fact, if you really want to see how well this is working, you can go into object mode, hit Alt-H or Shift-H with this selected, and hide our original model. You can see this is working quite well. But let's take a look at the paint option now. The paint option is very, very cool because what it allows you to do is literally draw on your topology and then have it create the faces automatically. So let's just select paint down here. And then you can see we've got immediately several different tools here. We've got the pen, the line, the eclipse, etc. Or ellipse, sorry, not eclipse. And we're just going to use the pen tool this time. And then you can simply left click and drag and draw your line about how you want it. Something like that, you know? So looking at topology, we've got a circle coming around here, a circle around here, around the mouth. So let's maybe draw another one around the mouth, just like this. And you'll notice that I'm just going slightly over the center line, because then we're going to later use the mirror modifier on this. Now, you might have noticed something. Whenever I move over a corner, a circle pops up. And this is one of the cool things. Whoops. And I just completely messed up my line by drawing that, or by moving it. That's one thing you don't want to rotate your view when drawing in paint, as you can tend to mess things up. So you do want to just draw from a single view. But to get back to what I was saying, you'll notice this little circle pops up. And that's because if you, let's say you draw a line like this, and then you realize you didn't go quite far enough, well, then you can just go to that circle and then continue drawing. So it auto-connects the lines. Very, very handy. Okay, so this is cool. So let's continue drawing our topology. We'll maybe bring another line down like this. And then we can simply, well, let's actually draw one more in here on the lips. Maybe about like that. And then let's just draw one straight down the center. And we'll bring that one over a little more. Bring these over a little more just to be safe. There we are. And then we can, let's see, let's go ahead and bring one across here. Or actually, we'll start there. We'll bring one down there. Bring one up here. Bring one across. Bring another one across. One over, and etc. So you can see, you can just draw on your topology and then just hit enter, and it automatically creates it. Very, very cool. Now you do need to hit Control N at this point occasionally. And, we need to do a little tweaking. So let's see. Down here, we don't want these triangles. And so one thing you can do to fix this, let's just select this vertice, hit V with our mouse on this side, and just rips those apart. At which point you can pull these, create a face, and select it for, hit F to merge it to a quad. You can maybe get rid of those faces there, such that, we can tweak this a little further. Take that down. We'll maybe fill in that face, and that face. We can select this edge by Alt right-clicking on it, hit Control E to edge slide. Oh, I guess, there we go. There I can slide that, and then I can just bring this vertex down by hand. And so, you can just go in, maybe add another loop cut in here. Left click and drag just real quick to make sure it's following retopo. Fill in this area and this area. We can maybe bring this down here, or about there. Go in. You can see we've got this triangle here. So let's just merge those like so. Although now our edge flow is not flowing right, so let's just go ahead and merge these two vertices. Merge at center. So at this point it's just a matter of cleaning up our mesh to get it how we want it. And you can see I've actually screwed that up royally, so we'll just take that out. Oops. Delete that face. Fill that, and fill that. There we are. Okay, so, like I said, it's just a matter of now just continuing this, and it's really quite easy. So maybe at this point I will take this one, left click, left click, left click, or excuse me, Control left click as I'm bringing those down. Maybe go a little further there. rotate that to fit better, bring it over, rotate to fit, bring it around and around, then maybe take these three down like so, take this one back up. And so, you can really go at this any way you want from this point on. It's just a matter of going through and setting up your topology how you want it, connecting things. Get rid of this face. But you can see how this makes things quite easy to make a low poly version of a high poly model. This is also quite handy for doing any kind of filigree work if you want to do like intricate filigree work, for example on a steampunk model or something like that. It's actually one of the exact uses I've used it personally for before in times past. And again, really, after you get the hang of this in the first couple minutes, then it's just the same thing over and over, getting it to look or to work just right. And the key thing, of course, is to just continue watching your topology, making sure that you're keeping a nice clean mesh. You'll notice that when I'm doing this, I consistently move in and out of wireframe mode, and this is just because in wireframe mode it allows me to select vertices a lot easier and to fill in the faces. But then retopo does tend to get a little finicky in wireframe mode, so you do need to be careful with that. Sometimes you'll find yourself with vertices placed God knows where, out in to infinity basically. So you can definitely see, particularly if you're comfortable in Blender and comfortable extruding a lot, filling in faces a lot, this really actually becomes a very quick process. I know it may seem fairly tedious, but you can see how quick I'm starting to move. And, some of you may be screaming, slow down, slow down, but realize I'm doing the same thing over and over that we started out with on the eye. And some of you may like to use the paint feature more. Personally, I like to extrude everything by hand because I get more control over my edge flow, and I'm more assured that things are going to stay clean. I'm very particular on my topology and that it flows well, particularly on a model like this. And that's actually something that's quite common as a use for retopo as a tool and such, is for cleaning up your topology. When doing high-res models, you tend to find yourself with very, very messy topology a lot of times. Whether that's because you're exporting a low-res sculpted model, or maybe you made your model out of Z-spheres and it doesn't work quite right. It works great for sculpting, but maybe nothing past that. Then you can very easily just go in, retopo your model, and you're set once more. Very, very good tool. For those people that are maybe familiar with other modelers, I know Silo has a wonderful retopo tool. I do believe ZBrush and Modo each have retopo tools now. And honestly, quite probably Maya and 3D Studio, of course. But Blender's does work quite well and quite fast. And frankly, it's a lot of fun. you know, when you're used to, particularly when you're used to modeling everything by hand, it's a lot of fun having a lot of this be automated, or not necessarily automated, but you know, close enough to it. And so you can see what I'm going to do on the spines here. Um, assuming that you're going to use a normal map on this, which most probably I would. Um, you know, I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial, but most cases that's generally what would happen at this point. These spines don't need to be nearly so detailed, and so I'm actually going to, you know, bring this all the way back, bring this back, fill this here, bring this up, bring those back and back. So I mean, you know, it's really very, very quick. And this might be a little tricky along the top here, but that's all right, because one thing that we're going to do is we're going to go in with our mirror modifier here shortly and bring in all of the edges. So go back in, fill these faces. You can use your box select, which is B on your keyboard, and then just left click and drag. Now, to get this normal map to, you know, if you were to normal map this, to get this to work really cleanly up here, you would probably need to add in a bit more detail in these and maybe even bring up a little point for the spikes. But I'm not going to worry about that for this tutorial just for the sake of time, as this is going to start to get a little long here in a bit. But just be aware that you would probably need to do that. And of course, I'm going to save my file. I got my faces reversed there. There we are. So let's go and hide our other model. We can start to see what we're getting. You know, you can still definitely tell it's based around the same model, but very, very quick and very easy. So going back in edit mode, I'm just going to keep extruding, try to make this fairly quick. But you can see, you know, I'm not spending a lot of time trying to figure out exactly how this is going to work. And part of that's just because, you know, I already know how the topology is going to be formed. If you're not nearly as familiar with topology, then you will find this to be a bit slower, but even so, it's still a very quick process. There we are. And then you can see, you know, I'm just going to bring these ones down and down. Bring it over. At this point we can go ahead and bring this out and out. Bring these down. you notice that one thing that I did here, and that tends to be very quick, is since we're extruding a single vertex at a time, much of the time, it's quick. We could just extrude, 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 and then do that each time, or we could simply, we know that these are going to be quads, so we can just extrude, extrude, and almost do kind of S patterns, and you can very quickly, put in all the vertices for multiple rows. Same thing here. Maybe I'll go in. Okay, I need one more. Then I need another path there. I'm going to need another loop there. So that's just Control R to fill in the edge loop. And we'll go back in and smooth some of these areas out that are a little finicky. And so all this is right clicking or right shift clicking to select them, hitting F, then tapping A with my pinky to deselect everything, and then repeating the process. Very, very quick, and most Blender users should be familiar with kind of that process. I do strongly urge that all of you, regardless of your skill set or where you're at in Blender, to get very, very comfortable with the keyboard. Using keyboard shortcuts is the single fastest way to model, particularly in Blender and the way that its interface is set up. It works best when you have one hand on the keyboard, one hand on the mouse at all times, and very, very seldom ever stray from that paradigm. Okay, so you can see I'm just at this point gonna bring these down, fill in these, and you'll notice I looked over and saw how many edges I had here, so I knew how many to extrude. Same thing here. I can see I've got one there, another one there, and then one more. So then I don't have to worry about getting the right number of vertices or having to go back and add more because I didn't get it right in the first place. It's always a good idea to just continue always looking at your model, seeing what you need to do. I realized we didn't go far enough in on the eye, so I'm just going to go do that real quick. Just constantly keep looking at your model from all different angles and evaluating things. Do you need to do more work here, less work there, cleanup work there? Just be very, very familiar with your model, particularly on head models. Since so many different things go into a character, and since, a person's face or a character's face is how we characterize them and how we essentially judge them, you do want to be very careful to make sure that you have it right. And so you can see I just extruded that and scaled it in. Now, notice that these things got moved over, and that does tend to happen. So at this point, I can just readjust some of these areas that didn't necessarily work, and I'm just moving these back to right under or right at the edge of the eye because I want it to fall in line with the eyeball rather than maybe the edge of the edge of the eyelid. There we are. So now I can go in and just kind of fill in these faces maybe. Or let's see, let's go ahead and just bring in an edge, fill that, bring in another vertice, fill that, and that. Same thing here and here. So that way it stayed all quads. Now, a lot of times that's not the way you would do a low poly eye, but just keep in mind all these things, a lot of them are going to be dependent on the situation of what you're working on. So just keep that in mind. And that's just definitely one way to do it, particularly if you were keeping that to a low poly minimum, strictly textured, and didn't have a actual dynamic eyeball in there. Okay, so this last bit, we'll just take these right down. And nice thing, I was talking about earlier, is that Blender, with the retopo, it perceives what tool you're using, so even if I rotate, scale, grab, it still follows the mesh. Very, very handy. And we're almost done here. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring these edges up. Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of times you don't want to do multiple edges at a time. It tends to get a little funky. If you want to be safe, stick to just one. Oops. There we are. Okay, now I do have a few too many edges in here, so we're going to have to do some work. So let's go ahead and bring up these other ones first, just to be sure. Apologies for the Skype. There we are. So lesson to anyone else looking to do screencast, be sure to close your other applications first. It's alright. Okay, so you can see I'm going to just fill in these areas, making use of my edge flow. Here we are. Rotate that. And it would seem that the comment that I made earlier about having to be in wireframe mode does not necessarily apply anymore. The Blender developers may have seemingly fixed that, as it used to be a serious problem. You'll notice that I did just go ahead and delete that edge loop because I don't need it anymore. But, just kind of play by ear, and if you find it's working fine in wireframe mode, then go for it. If not, then just stick to shaded mode. Okay, so now let's go. Now we've got that all extruded. Let's go out of edit mode, hide our other model, and take a look. Hide the eyeballs as well. It's pretty sweet. You can imagine a normal map then applied to this. Maybe we'll hit set smooth down here. No, I'm not a big fan of set smooth. Leave it set solid. You can see we've got a pretty good edge flow going on. We can do a little cleanup work here and there. But let's go ahead and add a mirror modifier. So in the edit buttons, go to the modifiers tab and click add modifier, mirror, and we want do clipping, just so that anything that's along the center will lock to the center line. And then let's also turn on this button here to apply the editing cage during edit mode. So now we can look at this and see where it's overlapping. Quick, easy way to make sure everything lines up is just Alt right click on the center line. So we select the entire center, and then same thing on the bottom half. And then just hit G and X to lock to the x-axis. Move left along the x-axis to lock some of them. And then left click and hit G and X again and move the opposite way to lock any that were on the other side. So now everything is locked to the x-axis. It's centered. We can see there's some areas in here. Maybe we want to pull these out a little bit more. Pull that out. There we are. So that's Retopo in Blender. Very, very handy tool. Works really, really well, and particularly good for game developers or anyone looking to do high-res modeling and apply it to a lower polygon model, particularly in the case of normal maps, displacement maps, or even a combination of both, what have you. Whatever you need it, that's Retopo in Blender. Enjoy.